Welcome to Wombs, Wells, and Waterways for our behind the scenes genealogical research preview. And today we'll be focusing on Google Maps and city directories, right? So these are meant to be short clips, essentially. And so there's always more to be said on this whatever topic we're doing. So we're just kind of introducing different aspects on a particular topic. So just so you know, so what I wanted to share is around some of the research techniques. Often people's are thinking about their family, but I'm also thinking about where their family may have been or where my family may have been and what was around that area. How do we look at those things? And some of the things that I've used is, fortunately, I used to disregard city records, city directories, because it just didn't necessarily tell me about who's related to who, right? And so sometimes it's not as exciting, and the momentum to really dig into it may not sit well right away. But you'll be surprised as you start to, especially if you've been researching for some time and you may have run into a space where it's like a little bit of a lull or a brick wall, so to speak, that allows you to think about, oh, let me think about how I can go further back and all these things, when sometimes you just have to go deeper into the community. And so that we're big on that here. So I'm going to share my screen and see if we can get that in the loop. And okay. I think I got it. Yes, excellent. So this is what I want to introduce you to. So sometimes, and we'll go to city records second, city directory second, but sometimes when you are researching your family and you are essentially trying to come up with an idea of where is this? Sometimes we go to Google Maps for county information, for city, like how close is this city to another city. And so I use that for that same reason. So if I'm not familiar with whatever county, it might be in a very familiar place, but fortunately, one thing I have noticed so far, and you can chime in, is that even if a town or something has not actually doesn't actually exist right now, it still will come up in the Google Maps search. So I'll try one of the towns that there's something called Elizabeth City. And when it comes up, there's Elizabeth City, New Jersey, Elizabeth City, North Carolina, but it's not showing the Elizabeth City that I'm interested in, and that is Virginia, right? And so I'm going to enter it anyway. I actually am quite familiar with the area, and I know that Elizabeth City is actually now known in the vicinity of Hampton, Virginia. But when you go to these historic records, the city and town, it's not really there. And so when you run into those instances, what happens is you start to feel like there's no way for you to map your people, right? So you definitely want to start to look at, well, what is it called now? Well, in some places like cemeteries and such, along with their address, they do provide coordinates. Some cemeteries are so far in the woods and such that they're only identified by coordinates, and you can put in coordinates here. And so, so now I might put. So that's for city names, but for the county, Elizabeth City, Virginia. is a city at that time. But let's take a look at some of the counties that I saw. There's a Wythe County, Virginia, and that's a different location now, even. So we'll go into and we'll look at surrounding counties. So I'm going to look at something that I know is a little bit close to it. So Newport News. And I wonder if there's a way for me to enlarge this a little bit more. Yes. So I only put Wythe County there because of one thing. Many people, if you're familiar with this particular part of the country, you're thinking, why would you put Wythe? So there's a Wythe County, and there's also something that existed way back when called a Wythe Township. And the Wythe Township is actually in that city of Elizabeth City, or for us, more or less Hampton, Virginia. So we'll zoom into that. But it's good to see how other things are situated in terms of naming things, because records are constantly, can be, for example, with can be used interchangeably where it should be a county, but it's really a city, or where something as simple as in this area, I think Eastern Shore, sometimes just listed like that. And what I found out before, and I'm going to clear this, I'm just getting used to this idea of like really using Google Maps as a research tool. So if I put Eastern Shore, there's Eastern Shore, Delaware, Eastern Shore, Virginia, and there is actually, I thought there might be, well, look, I think there's one more Eastern Shore that I was put. So this is kind of in the vicinity here, but I'm going to put I'm going to put Eastern Shore, Delaware, just to get a feel for what actually. So it's still pretty much along this side. But what we're seeing is its relevance in terms of like which Eastern Shore are we really talking about? And so there's records that may or may fall on either side of this line. There, we can see, if going a little bit closer, this state line here, but it's still considered the Eastern Shore. So thinking about how to be more expansive in your research to understand better, or more information about where you should be looking, right? And so we haven't even touched on the city directories, nor the fullness of using this to help research, but to better understand areas. And of course, you can take your little person here and bring it to a particular area. And yes, you're looking at current day, but you're also looking at what is happening currently there. What does it look like? How is it relating to perhaps descendants that may have stayed or moved away? These are all elements of, really marking out story, the narrative, because sometimes we can be very tied into sitting with census records to just say our people were there, but now let's understand what their environment was like. So I have not found out a way to go back in time with these pictures, but you can somehow create the maps that you want to see. And I just wanted to add one more destination. I just want to make sure, because I thought there was Eastern Shore in the Maryland area. Oh. I don't know if this is officially Eastern Shore Drive. Okay, so I'll pull back on that, but I'll look into that. But I thought there was one more Eastern Shore, and as we look across here, This is, and for my family, this part resonates with me. If I add in the well-known Hampton, Virginia, which was formerly under the realm of Elizabeth City, Virginia, um, you can see it's relative, how close or how it continues. So I have some family that are here for many generations, but when I go further back, they're listed as Eastern Shore without any state or indication, just in the Eastern Shore. So perhaps it's Eastern Shore, Virginia, or Eastern Shore, Delaware. It doesn't seem like that's too far off to really think about it, considering the waterways that are around here. And we always are taking the water into consideration for the movement. That's a very important part. So let's move on into another aspect of Google Maps that some people use, some people don't. So you don't find it here. It is a Google Map feature, but it's very difficult to find here. So you can save favorites, you can use this side of Google Maps for GPS and such. But if I were to search, and I just left this open, my maps, right? Try to put that in as a Google search, and this will come up, Google My Maps, right? And so this is an area, and I'm going to click on it now. This is an area where you can create kind of like a map that you can save. It comes with an idea of creating markers that allow you to see. So if I want to, am I not sharing? I'm sorry. I have to share each screen separately, I see. All right, so I will re-explain the My Maps phenomenon. Okay, here we go. So let me come back. So what I was saying is, when I thought I was sharing, I would put in My Maps as a Google search. And once you're into that Google search, you can click on probably the first tab that comes up. And it's not the same. It's under Google Maps, but it is a special feature of it. So it's kind of google.com/maps/ and sometimes it says My Maps here. It says D. Who knows? But anyway, you're here. And so at Google My Maps, which is attached to your email account, you can start to create your own map. So I would start here and I would just create a map. Why would someone want to create a map? Here's some things you can actually start to look at. And for me, when I'm doing maritime stuff, I'm looking at how people are moving around. And so there's so much to this. So we're not going to go all the way into this, because I can do like an entire course just on different aspects, but I just want to tickle your intellect around how you perceive maps and genealogy kind of working together. And so here's a couple of features. One, it's the entire world as we know it, and in a map kind of way. And so perhaps your family was once in Canada and then they moved to Chicago and all of these things. So I can actually start to I can put a marker. I can take, and I'm going to try to enlarge as much as I can, but there's these like tool boxes here. So you can select things, you can add markers, you can draw lines, you can measure distances, right? How cool is that, right? To really just think of it in that way. And so if I want to put a marker here, and granted, it doesn't need to be, let me just try to move this here. You can name it. You can say this is grandma's grandmother. Let's be more formal. Let's see, maternal grandmother, mother's first birth home, right? Or birthplace. however you want to say it. And then you can write additional information that you want to say, like maybe people that were in the house, maybe an exact address that you want to put in here, and then you would save it. And there's some different ways you can edit it. Like you can change the style, like the color of the marker. You can edit the information. Again, you can add an image or a picture here. And you might want to find directions. And so they always list the coordinates here for you in case you want to use it in a slightly different way. And so perhaps you found out later that your grandmother moved to what did I say? Chicago. And now you can actually, in this search bar, you can put the exact address. So I'm just being very generalized so that we can see just interesting functions. So we can say, grandmother's home after Civil War, whatever. And so because this is a different one, maybe I want to use a different color marker to show that. And maybe I'll follow. You can also use icons. I can put a house here instead of just that. I can, if it's a cemetery, I can use, they have more icons that you can choose. You can say, whether this is a business, something that looks like I'm trying to figure out, this is part of a port that your family may have come through. You can use all of these markers, and you can search for them in some type of category. So here I have two different markers here, and if I want to, I can add a line or shape. So there's a walking route. What they don't have yet is kind of like a water route. We got to get them on board. So I'm just going to do a line. So I'm going to go from here to here, right? And so I didn't mean to do that. So I have a line, right? And I can measure that. Oops. I think I messed up my measurements, but you can measure it, and I'm going to stretch it. Here we go. And you can find out how many miles. It looks like it's about 200 or so, 269 miles in total. And you're thinking about different things. So there's so many things that you can do. And this is the part of genealogical research where you're documenting things that you may have already found, right? Or just estimating. And so here's the last thing I'm going to say about this. So here you have a layer. So I have done layers in that I can layer layers. And this is one way that I've used layers. So you can have stacks of maps, right? So say your family has been in Virginia for 3 generations. Perhaps your layer would be generation 1. And I'm just making it up, but you can actually put a certain time period here. Maybe it's like for this, where was everybody living and working between 1870 and 1880, right? There's that. And then you can do the same exact thing, and you can add a layer, and you can say, maybe I'm looking at generation 2, and I'm looking at 1881 to 1890. However you want to do it. It could be by time period. It could be by family line, with all within one time period. And so for each one, you can add places to this layer, and you can go to this layer. I'll save it. All right. And so when I go to generation 2, I'm gonna just look at that one, right? I think hold Okay. So I can just go to generation 2. And so there are no markers here, right? And so when I want to preview, I can preview what the map looks like in one generation, and then also look at the second generation, and kind of getting a better view. And it's, I'm trying to go back this way. So when you're looking at these different aspects, play around with it. I wouldn't, you know, just get into a place of like, I have to know all the answers and all of these different things. Um, you can, what you're doing, you're just mapping out data in a different format. And it's just like when people say, like, some people learn in different ways. Um, I always, as a math teacher, and that's my specialty, is that one of the things that comes with documenting things in a visual way is inspiration. So when you see it on the map, you start, even the line, like you can start to look at, oh, what does the such and such map look like for, I'm gonna come back here. What does this map look like? And what is the driving? How would someone drive there? What places would they go? And as you start to zoom in, I hope I'm in the right. As you start to zoom in, you can um, zoom in a little bit better. Um, but you can start by looking at directions, but you can start to see if there's a highway that's involved, a common highway. I know there was a situation in my own family in South Carolina where we couldn't figure out, like, why were they there, but we was also seeing visually, we were seeing how Highway 17 ran right through everything. So here's this. So there's that. So we can go more in detail on this on another behind the scenes where we use it in the actual case. So I'm just introducing the idea. And I think it's really important. So you can save all of this, title this map. You can make a separate series of maps. So this could be, grandma. And maternal grandmother's family. Okay, let's get specific. And you can describe what it is. This was so and so, add some names, and this was, she was born in this time and that time. So we have some perspective. And chances are, like, what happens in the community may have changed greatly, but what things that probably haven't changed so much within one lifespan is probably like where the waterways are. Waterways again. And then also things like, you just start to look at historical markers, like things that change in terms of like major events that have happened, or say the railroad system is now a thing, and looking at ways that, and thinking about the occupations of the people that are in your family. And all of those things matter. Looking at the lines for the states and the cities and countries, keep an eye on those things. So I'm going to stop here on the Google Maps aspect. And let's go into Ancestry. Ancestry is not the only place to look up city directories. You can look in your own state. But most of them are now saying you can just go to Ancestry or Family Search to just look at them online. But what I would say is, I've gone to ancestry.com. And so what I'm at this screen, and let me, I'm having to remember that I have to reshare the new screen. All right, so I'm at this screen now. And so I am at U.S. City Directories, 1822 to 1995. Is this the only kind of directory that exists? No, but it's the one that we're going to talk about today. And so I'm just going to go back so that you know how I got here. So I'm going to go back. And so what I did was I went to the search, and I went to the card catalog of Ancestry, and that card catalog leads me here, as you can see, and I put in a keyword, city directory. And even if you're not sure what, so you can see that I've already selected city and area directories. There is an option that usually shows up, and you can click directories and member lists right away without entering a keyword. Now, perhaps you want to look specifically at a certain area, and I think I chose Virginia, but I'll go back. You can choose multiple states here, but you can go right here and look at all of the different kinds of city directories, how they're grouped, sometimes by specific city, sometimes, but either way, the US city directories is pretty comprehensive. What you may find in specific states and cities are different time periods. So here we have, there's a lot of records here. Directories is a pretty general category, but we're looking at something that's similar to what would be the white pages of neighbors and neighborhoods. And so you can look, a lot of things come up under directories. The time period may very well, so keep an eye on that. So we're just going to go to the general one here for today's behind the scenes. So here you can choose the state. Now, not all states will be chosen, will be here. Especially, so if I look at, I think I was looking for Virginia at one point, and then I was looking for the county I'm interested in, and I didn't quite see it, but we can look at, I'm actually interested in Norfolk. And so now look at the years. It says it starts from 1822, but the earliest one here is 1866, right? So we want to keep in mind that those things are not true for every single county. And so you can choose it, or you can just try to find your people. So I'm going to try here. I am familiar with someone that was on a census record and said they were in this area, or usually what happens to the census record, depending upon which census record you're looking at, they are documenting data from up to 5 years prior. And so this happens pretty often, like one of your ancestors could have died, but they are documenting the fact that they were in this house or in this town 5 years ago, but they may have died yesterday, or they may have died a couple months ago, but they will still be listed on that census record if it's within that window. And that's not true for all census records, I believe. And so here we are. You can go all the way through. And so when you're there, you could choose whatever year you want. And that may be a route for someone that has a lot of information already. Census records is a great way to document that. Newspapers, to if you found your ancestors' name in a certain town that's associated with a particular paper, then perhaps you would start to look at the year around that clipping. And so I'm going to look at one of my ancestors, Augustus Griffin. I actually know he was married in this town. I just don't know exactly how long. And then I also know that he came to Massachusetts, but I don't know exactly when he came to Massachusetts. The census record the federal census record is like every 10 years. So yes, in this particular year he was there, but is that when he arrived? Is that how long was he there prior to that census taker documenting that information? And a city directory can fill in those spots. Okay, so there's a lot of Augustus Griffins. Who knew, right? But there are some things that you want to, like I'm looking for Norfolk, Virginia. I didn't put that in, but I look at all of these Augustus Griffins. So I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to edit, and I'm going to put in Norfolk, Virginia, specifically. I'm going to add a spouse. Maybe that might help. And I'll select his gender. And the year that he was probably there, I'm just going to put maybe 1908. I don't know. I'm just going to put it in there and see what I come up. So I have a few, right? And it's a range, unless I bring it into a more plus or minus 5 years, plus or minus, it's just going to be a broad range. So this I know is him. I have done some research already. So if I look at the image, and this is the one, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just want to introduce you to some of them. So I know this is him from other papers and other documents, supporting documents. And so one of the things is, this is what I notice, there's something here. How do I tell if this is an African American or a Black person or someone who's not? And so when you're inside the directory, usually a film strip is at the bottom so you can move around. But this is out of this entire record set. And this is not just 1913. Like as I move along, I can choose a different year, right? So it's all clustered in this record set. But what I do want to go back to, I'm marking this page. So this is page 562. I'm going to write it down somewhere so I don't forget where I found Augustus. But I'm going to move back to an earlier day. And I probably don't need to go back that far, but let me see, 200. And so we're still in the people section. So city directories have different sections, right? There's section sometimes, and all city directories are not the same, right? So this just so we're clear, what I'm trying to look for is the fact that there's some notations here that I'm not familiar with, because perhaps I haven't looked at Norfolk's way of doing things in this period of time, that there's some type of asterisk next to his name, and then there's some names without it. And so I want to know why. And then there's the bolded, there's the abbreviation LAB, there's a H. What do these things mean? Tongue tied. All right. So I'm going to go back a little bit further. We're almost there. We're still in the G's, huh? I have Gaylord family members too. So I'm just at page 1, right? And so page 1 is telling me this is the first page of the directory. And like, you have that page number, so you don't need to flip each page like so. And so what I want to get to is the page where it tells you a little bit information about what you're about to see. And so I'm trying to get to the right page. So let's see. So there's a page where they explain how it's organized. And then they tell you about how the abbreviations are used in the book. And I'm just seeing, I might have passed it. Let me just make sure. Yes, so I think I've passed it. Let me go back. I'm looking at page 2. So there's some people that they added at the end, but they wouldn't be in the initial printing. Interesting. Did you know that that page was there? Removals and corrections that had to be made. So that's at the front of the book, and sometimes we'll just look straight at and so here's the general index. So I know right now, so on page 69, the abbreviations and just different ways that they classify people in groups. So this is a very important thing. This is a very important thing. So let me move forward. I just want to make sure. So page 13 corresponds to like page 27, right? So just because it says 69 in the index, you don't want to miss. I'm almost there. And I can kind of see from here we go. All right. I can see from the picture. So here we are. This is the abbreviations and how it's getting ready to be used. And so here, we're getting closer into it. The LAB, when I was looking at it, It means laborer. That might have been pretty easy to find out, but there are other things that denote American. It denotes attorney. It denotes a steamship, stenographer, a reverend, you know, just so that you're clear on what you're reading. And then there are a couple of things that I want to, but I still wanted to know information about the asterisk. So I'm going to zoom in. So right below here, it says names marked with this asterisk are those of colored persons. So that's helpful. That is not always the standard for all directories. And so you want to look to see, because sometimes it's denoted in different ways and sometimes it's not denoted at all. And that depends on the area, but also depends on the time period. And so we have Griffin, Augustus Griffin here. He's a laborer who lives in a house at this address, and he is African American. So here's the other part. So I found this address, but here's the community part, right? This is an address I can put into my Google Maps. Okay. Yeah. So some will be like, oh yeah, he was here. Move on to the next. But no, let's document where he is, because next year he might be in a different place, even though he's still in Virginia. And so moving from place to place is a very important aspect of understanding your ancestor's story, right? And for this particular ancestor, I know he moved twice here, and then he moved to Massachusetts, and he moved 2 or 3 times. So I know about, and because the census record acknowledged that he came there, lived with a group of people that he wasn't related to, and then got his own place with his own family. So that's very important to actually document a house that was considered, I wouldn't say like a boarding house, but a house where it was known by others who you would want to see, and who essentially could have been from the same area, or could they have been from different areas? How did they know that this was the person they needed to come and stay with? Right? Very important information. So let me go a little bit further, and I'll close out with this, is that 623 Marshall Ave could be a single dwelling place. It could be a huge house with other people. It could be your next door neighbor to a family member. But it's very hard to see that here because it's only done by surname, organized by surname here. But perhaps you're living to a family member with a different surname. You wouldn't know that here. Or is there, and the fact that was he married or not? Oftentimes in certain time periods, the women were not documented unless they were like the head of household, right? Very few times. And so let's go a little bit further. And so usually in this particular directory, I'm aware that these kinds of things happen around toward the end of the book of the directory. So I'm just going to put that out there. I'm just going to, I'm sorry, I went backwards. I wanted to go to 650. Let's see. All right. So we're in this, I'm just generally moving along. But what you see is these are, now we're at the end of the section, and I'll point out the section here. This is the street and avenue guide. So you can actually look up people by address. So I have 623 Marshall Ave. Were there other people living at Marshall Ave? Who was living? And so these, most of these are like, they'll tell you about intersecting streets, but the Google Maps is on this one tab over, and you can find out what those streets are that are intersecting. All right. So let's keep that tab open. That's why if you see my real screen with my tabs, there's a gazillion tabs open, but I tend to have to shuffle them around and reorganize. But let's go to Marshall. And so they're usually in alphabetical order. And so I'm just going to go a little further in to see if I can get to Marshall Avenue. If I remember, this might have been a little bit tough because so we have Chestnut, but we have, I'm moving along, I'm just going further. And so we're at McDaniel, Marshall Avenue. Here we are, right? And so what I found in other books is that there is sometimes a situation where you're looking at a particular street that may break into two parts, like southwest, northwest, that kind of thing, or they are only documenting a street up until a certain intersection. So those things, they do come up. So we have Marshall Avenue, and then I can look at 623 Marshall Avenue, and it looks like, what do you know? Augustus Griffin lives there. And it doesn't look like anybody else is documented as living there, right? But let's look closer. Like I'm assuming that these numbers are all connected because they're just like our address. They are next door to each other, which is not something that you can guarantee on a census record just because they're listed on one page away, right? But with a city directory, it's very address specific. And so here's the thing. He's a Griffin. I'm also seeing another Griffin not too far down this on the same street, but another Griffin. And so this might give me, let me look into this person. Or if I want to see who's living next door, Abraham Jones, it looks like he was in a community with a lot of other Black people on this street. This is like a black street, Black people living on this street, right? And so these are things that add more value points to start to look at where these people, I might start to look at where is Annie Barron from? Where was Abraham Jones from? Look at people that are around it. And then there's a Griffin here, the same last name. I'm sure they had to possibly had that conversation if they didn't know. And so this is just 1 year. What happens in 1914? Do I find him living in the same place, the same time? So these are things that you can look at. And I just from doing this, I have already identified him. And over time, certain people are living at that place that were not there in 1913. So this is a really valuable tool to have as a researcher looking for your people. Do not disregard these city directories. Now, I do say they do give you some insight that might be a little bit kind of nerve-wracking in terms of like, I'm not ready to know that information yet, but it's helpful. I'm glad I can use it. But think about if you have someone that you can verify on a census in a certain location, you're ready for the city directory. You're ready to start to look at different ways. And so I'm going to stop share and come back to you. So I hope some of what I shared was helpful to you. And if you have questions that you want, to me dig a little bit more in, I'll definitely engage in the comments. And yes, please tune in when you have a chance to look at the recording. Have a blessed day.